File. NESG Chairman, Olaniyi Yusuf. The Nigerian Economic Summit Group has said that Nigeria has come to the end of the nation's period of acute economic crisis, with projections of growth for 2026 pegged at 5%. This was disclosed during the launch of the 2026 Macroeconomic Outlook, titled, Consolidating Economic Stabilisation Gains. Pathway to Sustainable Growth in Nigeria, of the group on Thursday. Aside from projecting a 5.5% GDP growth rate, NESG also anticipates a surge in foreign reserves to $52 billion, while warning that the next 18 months represent a critical window to prevent a policy reversal. Opening the summit, NESG Chairman Niyi Yusuf emphasized that while recent structural reforms have been necessary, they are merely the beginning of a longer journey. Nigeria has just emerged from one of the most disruptive adjustment periods in its recent economic history, Yusuf stated. Economic transformation is not just an event, it is a sequenced and perpetual process. Reflecting on the painful nature of recent changes, he noted, these reforms were not painless, but they were unavoidable. They represented the stabilization phase of our reform journey. However, he was quick to clarify the limitations of this phase. Stabilization alone does not equate to prosperity. Growth remains modest and uneven, driven by a narrow set of sectors with weak transmission to employment and household incomes. Yusuf warned that the nation must now focus on the hard work of the next phase. The key question before us, therefore, is no longer whether reform is necessary but rather how we consolidate gains already achieved and convert them into sustainable, inclusive growth. He further cautioned, skipping steps may come at a cost, and confusing one phase for another may lead to policy inconsistency and reform fatigue. Providing the technical roadmap for the year ahead, NESG Chief Economist, Dr. Olusegun Omisakin, presented a framework designed to move the patient from stabilization to acceleration. The challenge now is that we are no longer in a state of crisis, as referenced by the chairman. The present situation gives us the opportunity to look critically at how we optimize the gains we've seen so far, Omisakin said. Setting clear benchmarks for 2026, he announced, this year, we are projecting 5% GDP growth, inflation around 16% for the whole year, and our reserves to jump to $52 billion. He added that for long-term stability, our inflation targeting should be looking at single digits by 2029. Omisakin highlighted the growth gap that must be closed to ensure national progress. We have moved significantly from where we used to be, now we are at 3.8%, but the expected growth the economy needs to really move ahead is around 5%. to 6%. A major highlight of the report was the warning regarding the critical 18-month window, following stabilisation reforms, citing historical precedents in countries such as Ghana and Brazil. Most countries are so satisfied with stabilisation that they relax. And after 18 months of non-consistent implementation and consolidation, the economy reverses, Omisakin warned. He stressed that the risk of backsliding is high. If we fail to do this, the risk is that we may move back and start growing in the range of 2% to 3%, which is what we've been doing so far. To achieve the 5.5% growth target, the NESG is calling for a massive shift toward productive sectors. Omisakin noted that the current reliance on the services sector, which accounts for 60% of GDP, is insufficient. We need to focus more on strengthening structural transformation by identifying the role of agriculture and manufacturing in the economy, he said. If we manage the consolidation process very well, evidence suggests that we can grow the manufacturing sector by 6% to 8%, especially if it is well linked with agriculture. In his concluding remarks, Omisakin urged all stakeholders to remain committed to the current path, calling on the private sector to hold government accountable for reform, and for the government to implement the consolidation agenda with discipline and transparency. Nigeria has turned the corner. Now we must sustain the momentum, Omisakin concluded.